treacherous, and when children are forced to leave their homes and when they are forced to go on a treacherous journey into an uncertain future, these rights, of course, are violated, and it becomes every state's positive obligation to protect them. It is, however, a sad reality that children on the move, who have often gone through multiple traumatic experiences, often find themselves at high risk of facing institutional violence once they arrive in a country deemed safe, where they have the right to ask for international protection. Children on the move face a multitude of risks of mistreatment and threats to their rights, as well as their physical and mental integrity, and pushbacks, trafficking, and exploitation are other forms of violence that threaten children on the move. At the same time, it is our collective responsibility as an international community to ensure that frontline states, like for example Greece, can build the necessary capacities also to protect the rights of children on the move. For this, they need international solidarity and support. When children arrive in a safe country and ask for protection, they ask for due identification and reception, child-friendly procedures. These procedures need to be respected, and first of all, they need to be in place and properly implemented. This will allow frontline states to respect, protect, and fulfill the rights of all children on the move, and ultimately act in the best interest of these children. In Luxembourg, as in other countries, the migration management system is certainly not perfect, but we work on improving it by following, among other things, the recommendations of the Committee of the Rights on the Rights of the Child on integrating stronger child protection principles. As for unaccompanied minors, for example, a consultative commission of a group of professionals from multidisciplinary teams has been set up following UN recommendations to assess the situation of every child that arrives on our territory and suggest a course of action taking into consideration the best interest of the child, of course. Obviously, the child's rights to be heard is respected by this commission. And finally, I would like to underline the excellent bilateral relationship that Luxembourg has with Greece. Our Greek friends have faced indeed a very difficult economic situation over more than a decade now. And while they have been one of the countries that received the largest number of people on the move in the European Union in recent years, they also have received less solidarity than they could expect. At the same time, we welcome their willingness to listen to United Nations human rights mechanisms and civil society, how they can improve their national systems. The principle of non-refoulement needs to be respected without exceptions, of course. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we need to work together to ensure that children on the move are protected from institutional violence while seeking protection and safety. It is our responsibility to ensure that they can live happy, protected and fulfilled lives and grow up in a more peaceful future. That's what we wish for, and that's what we work for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Bichler, and for this very good introduction. Just to say for those online who are growing, the number is growing, that you have detailed biographies under the chat so that we don't lose time. Most of the panelists are very well known, but still you will have also interesting links and other details. Sorry. Without losing time, I will give the speech to Dr. Madam Jit and our friend Najat from New York. I really appreciate that she is with us today. She's traveling, and even during last year, the COVID year, she has been traveling a lot. I insisted a little bit, and I feel guilty today because in addition, she has a bronchitis, but her role is very important for setting the scenery, the frame, when we're speaking about institutional violence, and you know that she's the special representative of the Secretary General on violence against children with very concrete targets for 2013. But she's also, and that's perhaps is less well known, the chair of the Interagency Task Force on children deprived of liberty, which is now working on the implementation of the global study on children deprived of liberty. And there is a chapter on migration and children on the move. So her words will be very interesting to hear. Najat, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alex. Excellencies, dear participants, dear friends and colleagues, and dear youth representative, I first want to thank the NGO panel on children deprived of liberty and the government of Luxembourg for associating me at your reflection at this crucial and timely event. Indeed, the urgency for investing in the protection and well-being of children on the move is more and more relevant than ever worldwide. Because first, too many children on the move worldwide are still left behind. More children than ever before are on the move, fleeing conflicts, natural disaster, poverty, discrimination, violence, unsafety, food insecurity, among others. At the end of 2021, the number of children on the move has been estimated at 36.5 million children due to conflict and violence in various countries, the highest number since the Second World War. In addition to this sad record, the war in Ukraine has displaced 4.3 million children, more than half of the children in the country, and 7.3 million children have been displaced as a result of natural climate change and environmental disaster. At all stages of their journeys, children on the move are exposed to a heightened risk of violence. Children travel alone or with their families within and across countries, are facing continuum of violence, fear, and anxiety. And you know, many of them, especially unaccompanied and separated from their family, left without parental care, with disabilities, living in institutions, in foster homes or state care, who require special attention, are most likely to be victims of child trafficking, sexual exploitation, child labor, enrollment of children in armed criminal and violent extremist groups, or go missing along these dangerous journeys. Yet, in many countries, children are still deprived of liberty because of their or their parents' migrant status and under policies that criminalize irregular migration. Many of them who left and continue fleeing home countries, such as Syria, Myanmar, Yemen, DRC, Afghanistan, countries in the Sahel, among others, are trapped in long and uncertain status determination processes for years. At the same time, children on the move are exposed to discrimination and double standards, not only because of their migration status, but also because of their country of origin, combined with lack of access to essential services such as health, psychosocial support, education, social and child protection, and justice in societies facing increased widespread xenophobia. We know that criminal networks, evolving technologies, darknet, cryptocurrency are increasingly taking advantage of these children to be sold, bought, and exploited. The lack of identification and referral for victims is still a prevailing problem. In many countries, immigration and border control authorities, who are the first point of contact, are not sufficiently linked to child protection agencies and services. Children on the move often lack access to child protection and are denied opportunities for family tracing and reunification. Their access to justice for the safeguard of their rights as victims of trafficking is also often denied. Children on the move without documentation are stigmatized as intruders due to fear of arrest, deportation, or retaliation from criminals. They are less likely to report abuse to authorities in transit and destination countries. As a result, they may fall through the cracks of child protection systems and go missing, sold, trafficked, or living on streets. My second message: huge toll is paid by children and societies worldwide. Children are experiencing severe and long-lasting mental health problems, such as anxiety, behavioral disorder, depression, increased risk of self-harm and suicide, and an aggravated sense of hopelessness with a severe and long-lasting impact on their development and well-being. Children denied of their rights may not reach their full education and health potential, which will limit their future income and productivity and impact human and social development of the whole societies. Third message, this multidimensional crisis have severely tested the capacity of states to ensure children's education, protection, and well-being, and highlighted the discrepancies of laws and procedures within countries and the lack of standardized approach and sharing information. Overall, countries are not prepared to respond to the huge inflows of people looking for survival. They do not track the inflows and outflows of children on the move, and even if they may have tools in place, countries do not manage to implement them well to ensure the safeguard of children on the move. Dear participants, in my recent country visit to Romania, Greece, France, Iceland, Austria, Switzerland, Belgium, Italy, but also Chad, Niger, Lebanon, and Jordan, I have witnessed the aggravated impact of this multidimensional crisis on children on the move worldwide and the challenges to duly protect these children. These challenges were also highly stressed during the roundtable we organized in Romania involving child protection, migration, national coordinator, anti-trafficking coordinator, law enforcement representative of Ukraine, and cross-border countries. It appears that there is a heavy pressure on national child protection systems and countries that adopted alternative to institutionalization and who are currently reopening institutions. We are currently weakening the system of the cross-border country. You have to be very careful about that. My fourth message, we can do better and faster in a coordinated way. Even though many countries are taking measures to address institutional violence against children on the move, we need to do more and faster to ensure children on the move are protected and their rights upheld. To revert the phenomenon of institutional violence, it is imperative to have political will to ensure children are placed at the center of the state's migration framework and to develop standard child rights-based models of response and policy framework, including use of technology, adequate data collection, and case management, border management, to fulfill our collective responsibility of safeguarding the whole myriad of human rights to children on the move. First, through enhanced preventive action, awareness raising of children, families, and communities about ways to help prevent abduction, sexual exploitation, domestic violence, trafficking, or other serious crimes against children. Proactive, multidimensional, and long-term policies minimizing risks and enhancing protective factors at family, school, community level, and online. This includes enhanced capacities of children and young people on risk factor and empowering them to stay safe by boosting, for example, their digital skills and their cybersecurity. Multidisciplinary and multi-agency approach and partnership involving not only law enforcement, but also child protection agencies. Establishing and investing in rapid emergency child alert system and hotlines. Second, ensuring effective protection through child-friendly border management and non-discriminatory treatment of all children on the move, irrespective of their origin. Provision of information in languages children understand on available support services, including hotline, family preservation, and reunification. Enhanced cross-border cooperation for proper registration, referral, and tracking of children on the move, in particular, unaccompanied or separated children or children coming from institutions. For example, as we are observing in the case of the current humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, often while children are registered at the first point of entrance, further movement in the Schengen zone are not tracked and information not shared between the transit and destination countries, increasing the risk of children going missing or be trafficked. Strengthening national child protection systems and basic services, including education, health and mental health, social protection, housing, psychosocial support, child helpline, justice, including legal counsel and representation, to make them accessible to all children without discrimination as the best way to strengthen protective environments and ending impunity for the perpetrators through improved capabilities for criminal investigation, cross-border cooperation, and mutual legal assistance. Better data and evidence on to identify and develop global solutions to tackle the problem. And most importantly, just equal treatment and best interest of the child should guide all our responses in line with the CRC, the SDGs, the 2 global compacts on migration and the refugees. We have to keep in mind that children on the move are first and foremost children, and the rights move with them. We need to strengthen South-South cooperation, North-South cooperation, and South-North cooperation, and strengthening multilateralism, linking humanitarian response to inclusive people-centered development, focusing not on the security of frontiers, but on the security of human beings. My 5th message, solutions should be first and foremost be informed by children's experience of how they access support and referral systems online, offline, and stay safe. Children, I remind you, are part of solution and are active agents of change. Dear participants, less than 8 years remain for us to make the ambitious targets of the 2030 agenda a reality. The Global Compact on migration and on refugees processes in place mark a turning point for us to end institutional violence and to ensure that children on the move are not left behind. Children's status should prevail over refugee or migrant status. Children on the move have been left very far behind. As we build back better, we must look beyond COVID-19 and be ready for all other crises caused by conflict, widespread violence, food insecurity, poverty, discrimination, insecurity, natural disaster, climate change. We must transform this continuum of violence that shapes the life of children on the move into a continuum of care and protection of their fundamental rights, ensuring that they are not left behind. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, dear Najat. You have been up to the level expected, so extremely powerful with very concrete recommendations, exactly what we want. Thank you for being with us despite the busy program. And we know that you're also very much involved in the 2 global compacts that are now on. And it's very important that these views are reflected also there for the follow-up of the global compacts. While we are preparing the video, now we will have a video message, a short video message by the Special Rapporteur on the rights of migration. You know, his report was presented to the Human Rights Council recently. I just wanted to say that civil society is really so grateful to Najat and her office, her colleagues, because we work together on child participation. We work on the fight against violence, but in many levels, on many issues together. And I think this cooperation, multi-stakeholder cooperation, which we do us as civil society in the field, people like Najat, who, as you heard, she's all the time also in the field. She's not behind her office in New York. The CRC members, and we will hear Philip later. So this, I think, can make the difference. If we are ready, we can launch the Felipe González Morales.
I thank the Friends of Children International for its invitation to participate at this side event on institutional violence against children on the move. The situation of children on the move is of major importance for my mandate. It's an issue that we have addressed in many communications and project actions to states, and also in a thematic report of ending mandatory detention of children that I presented to the General Assembly a couple of years ago. Last week, I presented to the Human Rights Council a report on human rights violations at international borders, which includes the situation of migrant children. In this regard, I presented cases from many countries from around the world, at which through the practice of pushbacks,
Thank you. We thank Felipe González Morales, the special rapporteur, who is always also very with civil society, but also on member states on how to give concrete good practices and share with them. We not only criticize what is going wrong, but also approving and multiplying the good practices is something that we as civil society and also the special rapporteur is promoting. Without transition, I wanted to give the floor now to a very special guest, Rahmat. I won't make a long introduction because I think he will introduce himself. But I just wanted to say that Rahmat comes from Afghanistan. We know him now for a few years when he's not a child anymore, he's a young man. But we knew him when with his family, in fact, because of the regime of Taliban had to leave Afghanistan and flee out of the country. His only dream and his only wish at the time, it was to have access to education, just to go to school. And that was before the last events in Afghanistan, but even at that time in his region and because of ethnic issues, they were deprived of any access to education, the simple things, or to go out and play with his friends. In any case, his family had to flee altogether out. They went to Iran. In Iran, he had to be, happened to be separated with his family. And then with a long story, but I will leave him give details and also impressions, because if we speak about institutional violence against children on the move, it's better to listen to them first. He came to Europe and he will tell you a little bit of his story, but we will do it a little bit as a dialogue also. So Rahmat, the floor is yours, and thank you for coming from Basel here to address these people who are so willing to listen to you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. So thank you so much also. So I don't know from where I start to. So in general, the children, so in every 2 minutes in the world, like one child abused from the people. So the children was born to be abused in the world? No, of course no. Yeah, so there's many people and there's many children they abused from different way, like trafficking child or like sexual abuse. And like emotions. So for example, yeah, some people say the children, or it can be girl or boys, they told them, yeah, for example, I love you or I like you, and they will get the emotions. And other ways they force them to abuse the children. But when I come from Afghanistan to Greece, so in the way was very difficult. So when I come into Greece, there's nobody to inform me where I live and how I should to live in a new country, to learn the culture, and there's no guardianship. But I find my way alone, but it was not easy because we don't have the basic needs. We don't have nothing, just it was not me, but there's a lot of children, they sleep in the inside of trash in the jungle, and they spend the time there, and they didn't know, they have a dream. They had a dream when they came there, and then they lost the dream, and they don't know what they have to do and what's the next plan, because some people abuse of them. I have a lot to say, but I don't want to take a lot of time. But
you can continue a little bit, Rahmat. I think everybody wants to listen from you. I recall one moment you told me when you arrived to Europe, European ground, you said, wow, this is paradise. I'm in paradise. And then, as you said, that was a dream that little by little, but what didn't work? Because also I know that there was violence before reaching the European, but let's speak about when you arrived in Europe. I know you came to Greece and then you came to Switzerland also, where you are living now and studying. I know that in 6 months in Greece, you were fluent in Greek language, which is not easy, and I can certify that. He speaks fluently Greek. He even wrote a poetry, and in 2019, in fact, he won a Child Rights Award. Philip from the Committee on the Rights of the Child can be a witness because he was in the jury together with UNICEF, who granted the award. And this poem, you can also speak about this poem. What did you want to express, Rahmat? Because you're speaking a lot about love and about all the things that you wanted to have instead of violence when you arrived in Europe. But let's take it when from the time that you are integrated and you were in camps here in Greece. So what we could we have done better? What we can do differently? Not in order not to break the dreams of these children.
yeah, so the first thing is to be someone to the children trust them and to talk with them. So to have a guardianship, or it can be parents or friends or guardianship. Like before I met Nandina, I didn't know nobody there, but when I met Nandina and we talked together like a friend, so we are just a friend, and we couldn't talk about everything. So the first thing is, for me, it's very important to have a guardianship. If the children doesn't have the parents, but I know there's many children like they're 10 or 12 years old, and they don't have the parents and they need a guardianship. And that time it's very important thing that the guardianship or some people to talk with them, about the private body of body to and how they protect themselves and how and learn them how to say no to someone else. And
please.
Yeah, and that's very important thing. And if they know and if they learn them how to say no, and then they can protect themselves also. And if they have something, and they can also to talk with guardianship to someone trust them.
Thank you, Rahmat. We will have a second round of questions, so you can keep the follow-up later. But just to say that this is something very important what he just said, Rahmat, because these children, when they arrive, they are also exposed to adults. There are a lot of abuses in the camps in general. There are also outside the camps, there are criminal networks that they are looking for these children. And it's our responsibility, and I'm not accusing anybody, but our responsibility as European citizens and the countries to protect them, to ensure that there is no abuse. They came here to save themselves for a war, from persecution, and they merit this protection that also Najat mentioned several times in her introduction. Now I wanted to give the floor to Claire Pavlaki, who just joined us. Sorry, Claire Pavlaki is online. Sorry. Claire, you are still with us?
Yes. Hello, everyone.
You have the video. Yeah. So thank you very much for joining us. You can speak a little bit in a few words, and you can put on the chat more information because you are part of a special secretariat that has been created in Greece for the protection of unaccompanied children. And also give us a little bit the figures, perhaps, to have a frame on what we are talking about. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, dear Your Excellency, dear organizers, dear participants. First of all, thank you for this invitation and for giving us the floor to discuss about the work that has been done by the Special Secretariat for Unaccompanied Minors, for the protection of unaccompanied minors. First, let me, because our service was established in 2020, let me say a few words about the Special Secretariat itself. So it is a separate and dedicated unit to the protection of WAMs within the Ministry of Migration and Asylum in Greece. It is mandated to initiate and implement all necessary policies in order to ensure the protection and the well-being of unaccompanied minors, separated and stateless children. It has developed for the first time in Greece a national strategy for the protection of unaccompanied minors, and its work is also an aim to implement and supervise this strategy. Let's discuss and let me give you a brief idea how the time allows me also about the situation of unaccompanied minors in Greece now in numbers. So according to the last statistics of June, 2,095 children reside in Greece, 89% out of which are boys, while only 11% out of them are girls. The majority of the children arriving and residing in Greece are teenage boys, so only 7% of the children in Greece are below the age of 14 years old. In Greece, the accommodation situation is that the majority of children reside in the shelters, the so-called shelters, the accommodation centers in the more formal way. So more than 1,000 children reside in accommodation centers, which are scattered all around Greece, in Thessaloniki, in Alexandroupoli. The majority of them are in Athens, and there are some in the border islands. And there is another accommodation scheme which is really important for children's transition into adulthood, the supported independent living apartments. So 248 children reside in those apartments. Those apartments target children between the age of 16 to 18. And there are 141 children residing in accommodation, emergency accommodation facilities that I will briefly explain in the next part of the presentation. As Rahmat stated before, and it's very important to hear people from the community and especially former unaccompanied minors, there has been a lot of children who went under the radar and who were living in precarious conditions or homeless. So what we have developed since April 2020 is the National Emergency Response Mechanism for unaccompanied minors residing in precarious conditions. In collaboration with UNHCR, local NGOs as the Network for Children's Rights, ARCES, an international organization for migration and metadrasi, we are operating a 24/7 tracing line. The tracing line is comprised by a team of experts who are based in the Special Secretariat for the Protection of WAMs, who are responsible for the case management. What is important is that this tracing line is accessible to anyone, including refugee children themselves, who can contact us through different modes, different modalities, Viber, WhatsApp, phone call, or email, as we know that children do not always have access to the same modes of communication. It is important to mention that since January, to give you an idea of how the line works, more than 2,000, to be exact, 2,596 children people have contacted the tracing line to report children who are in precarious conditions. How this works: when a child is identified and is referred to the line, a mobile unit will reach to him and then they will be transferred to an info desk. The children will conduct a COVID test. They will be referred to the emergency accommodation said before, and they will move also to police departments of reference when the identification and Eurodac registration will be conducted. Then the children will be moved to the emergency accommodations. There are about 180 places in the mainlands. The children will stay for 3 weeks of stay. There they will be given the chance to have a best interest assessment procedure. They will be registered in the asylum service and they will proceed some medical exams. After that,
You have one minute still.
of course, please.
No, you have still 1 minute remaining.
Oh, okay,
for your
sorry, I
time.
thought 1 minute. Yes, I will. So then the children will be placed to long-term accommodation facilities. As you mentioned before, also the situation in Ukraine, it is important to mention that through the National Emergency Response Mechanism, there is a best interest assessment team in Promachonas. Promachonas is the entry point for Ukrainian children. So we conduct best interest assessment on the spot. We believe that the National Emergency Response Mechanism for unaccompanied minors, which we could not have done without our partners, as I mentioned, UNHCR, NCR, ARSIS, IOM, Metadras, and of course the competent authorities, it's a preventive measure for exploitation, child abuse, and trafficking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will come back perhaps to have more details on some good practices that you have introduced and you wanted to share with the group.
Yes.
Without transition, because of lack of time, I will give the floor to Nantina Tsekeri. Nantina is a lawyer. She's the director and also the founder of Defense for Children International in Greece. She has been a Child 10 Award, the prestigious Swedish award back in 2020. And Nantina, I wanted to ask you about, give us a little bit the definition on your side as a practitioner of the rights of the child and of the children on the move in particular. How do you see the different forms of institutional violence? And what are the shortcomings and also the deficiencies of the current system in order to reach conclusions on how we can deal with them? Thank you, Nantina.
Thank you very much, Alex, for giving me the floor. And also thank you, all of you who have made it here today and all of you who are online now and you are watching this event. I am quite emotional, actually, I have to admit, after Rahmat's intervention. I feel that what Rahmat bravely shared with us echoes the message that all the children on the move that I had the chance to meet while I was working want to deliver here today. So I see you, Rahmat, as a representative of their cause. And also would like to mention, I would actually also to take maybe the discussion one step before the good practices, which are very much welcome. I'm really glad to have Ms. Pavlaki here today sharing with us how states, if there is willingness, can do much better for children. But let's take the discussion one step back. By first of all, acknowledging that there is no state, I think, unfortunately, if I'm wrong, you can correct me in this world, that is not committing institutional violence against children, generally, particularly against children on the move. And I think that's why we're all gathered here today, because we acknowledge the importance of the issue and how all together we need to work on the same table, having the same agenda to find solutions. I think institutional violence by definition means that the system, the institutions, the structures create by action, but also by omission, harm to children. When it comes to children on the move, it can take various forms. Some of the forms already described by Ms. Najat and also by Rahmat. The list goes on and we can really speak for hours about explaining the specific forms, the deficiencies and so on. What I would like to do from my point of view as a practitioner is that I feel that we really need to place the entire dialogue into the context of the child protection general systems in place. We need to go deeper. If we continue addressing the issue in a context of emergency response, like we'd never expected Ukrainians to come and seek for asylum. We never expected a war. We never expected climate change. We never expected the situation with the Taliban in Afghanistan, and the list goes on. Then I think we will fail big time, these children. It's very important, any policy, any implementation of law, and any durable solution to be really centered in the context of a justice and due child protection system. When it comes to Greece, because I've been practicing a lot child protection services in Greece, as the committee, the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child recently recommended, we need to have a durable child protection system in place, which actually acts in a preventative way. And what I mean by that, as Rahmat explained, if we hear carefully what Rahmat said, he used more than 4 times one word: friend, trust, love, someone to be by my side. This, in legal terms, is translated into the need of a guardianship system, which is not in place. It's fantastic that we have a tracing mechanism at the moment in place, but is this enough if we don't have a guardianship system in place? Is this enough when we don't have a coherent child protection strategy? Is it enough when we don't have protocols, when there is no case management that goes beyond the boundaries of migration? These are some open questions that I'm really happy to discuss more later. And if, because Alex, you asked me to become a bit more specific about the forms, I would really like, yes, I would really like also to mention that when we speak about children on the move, it's not only about unaccompanied minors, but there are thousands of children on the move in the context of families. And it's very important not to see them as the extension of the adults that they accompany them. There is a lot of discussion also in that. I don't have time. Maybe later we can expand further on that, but this is also very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nantina, and we'll come back with more questions. I want to turn now to Vasily Yuzanin he's the head of International Migration Law in the International Organization of Migration. He's also part of the task force on the global study on children deprived of liberty. And I want to ask you, Vasily, from your experience, IOM is almost in all the countries. We're speaking about Greece, but also in all the Ukrainian borders. From your experience, from the tools you are producing, what are the forms of institutional violence that you think that they are the ones that are more experienced by children, in particular related to trafficking and detention, for instance, and what the effects of the lack of implementation of these tools that they are available to countries? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for having me today. And it's a great pleasure and honor to speak today at this important event. And well, I would like to say that, yeah, I mean, responding to your question, I would like to make perhaps a very short step back and just say that children on the move are perhaps the most vulnerable category among all people on the move. So in fact, we have to make sure that they have access to specially tailored protection and assistance mechanisms, specially tailored for the children on the move. So, I mean, we've heard a lot of aspects and a lot of problems that that children are confronted with when they move from the country of origin to the country of destination. And of course, they become victims of trafficking and smuggling, migration-related crimes. In the same way, they become victims of forced labor, exploitation, sexual abuse, they're forced to begging, and many other horrible things that may happen to them. And important to note that, well, as soon as we're speaking about trafficking and smuggling, they often experience violence and abuse on the entire route from the country of origin to the country of destination, being in the hands of transnational organized criminal groups. So one thing, and the other thing is the problem is that sometimes them being non-nationals, they are becoming non-visible to already existing systems in the countries, especially at the destination, that may provide support and assistance. So they are not visible, the systems are not targeting those categories of people on the move. I would like to perhaps now we're coming to this, we're coming to a very important understanding that we have to make this system visible, and we have to, in fact, look at what the international law and the global frameworks are proposing to us to make the systems targeting and responding to the needs of children on the move. And well, just to perhaps take this example, which was or area which was discussed a number of times today, is detention, and particularly alternatives to detention. The modern stance, the contemporary international law says that the children should not be detained for the purposes of for the immigration-related purposes and for the purposes of migration. And this is not only preventing children to have access to assistance and protection and support mechanisms, the detention itself, but it brings further harm and trauma, and that trauma is remained unattended, uncured, unaddressed. And furthermore, the detention itself is traumatic, and that keeps the deep scars the entire of their life. Another thing is here, same speaks to children, and many of them, we have figures, of course, who are becoming victims of trafficking, and they would require a particularly targeted instruments, ways to protection, and addressing the psychological, physical trauma that they may have gone through. And if they are detained, of course, this is becoming unavailable to them. So the effects, of course, as I mentioned, is trauma, lack of protection, lack of support, no assistance, and no rehabilitation. So in that sense, I think we must make sure that we assist states in targeting the existing systems or creating the systems if they are absent that would be effective and, well, efficient to provide protection, necessary assistance, and rehabilitation and support mechanisms. Sometimes it's just reorientating the national systems to the children on the move, or sometimes creating those systems. I stop here.
Thank you so much, Vasily, and we will continue because I think IOM has a lot of experiences to share. But I take a lot, I think, on this population, among the most vulnerabilized. We prefer vulnerabilized than vulnerable children, which are these victims of trafficking and of detention. And as many experts, including the global study, said, the privation of liberty is a form of structural violence itself. So it's a second trauma, as you said. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Tinia. Professor Alpergi is a professor of psychologist and psychology at the Deiri University, the American College in Athens. But I know she has also a lot of practical experience with projects and children. So I wanted to ask you, what do you consider as long-term effect to the children that are submitted to this institutional violence in the context of migration?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Okay, I'm going to move a little closer. I first want to say that just the concept of children on the move, the idea or the word on the move violates a very basic, fundamental, actually, condition for someone to grow up healthy and develop what we consider a functional personality. So for children to grow up as functional adults, they need one condition. At least this is what resilience literature shows to us. The need, the frame that is stable. And by frame, that can be a place, it can be a family, it can be a personal reference. So when we talk about children on the move, right there, we don't have a stable frame. It's gone from the beginning, from definition. As Nadina said, children on the move are not necessarily only migrant children. We can talk about children moving within, a country, across countries, within families. To me, these are all children on the move who don't have a stable frame of reference so that they can receive and have the fundamental rights that we consider for children necessary in order to grow up and become members of society. The idea that, we're still discussing this in Europe in these days is also kind of striking to me from many perspectives. I would agree with Nadina again that I don't think we're in a position to say that we don't know. I've recently joined an initiative, a European initiative on bringing justice for victims of abuse from years ago. So I met people who were children on the move, who were migrant children decades ago in different conditions. So at least European countries know we had to deal with that. So the fact that we don't have systems in place, that we don't have people in place, that we're still talking about capacity building is really mind-boggling. But that doesn't mean that we don't, we cannot go back and restore things and prevent things from happening again. So, we talk about how to protect children. We talk about how to prevent children from being hurt, from being abused. We talk about children seeking asylum when children should not have to seek asylum. That should be a given. You should be giving them asylums as, countries, not ask them to seek for an asylum. And this is really, perplexing. On why we're still talking about such fundamental things when, at least from a scientific perspective, we know exactly what's necessary for someone to make it into adulthood and be functional. And people can make it. And, Rahmat is a perfect example of if you provide at least one frame of reference, one stable thing, then they can actually make it despite the trauma or in spite of the trauma. So I'm not sure how long I'm supposed to go
I
on
think
that.
it's a good introduction, and we will have a second round of questions. In order to finish this first round, I want to give the floor now to Philippe Jaffé. He was supposed to be with us, but an urgent mission brought him to somewhere else, to the capital of Switzerland. But we appreciate that he managed to be with us online. So Philippe has a lot of hats, but the hat we brought him here mainly is as a member of the Committee on the Rights of the Child and his experience in it. And we spoke a lot today, and we are speaking about child-friendly justice and child-friendly procedures in order to avoid the exposure to violence and institutional violence. So I wanted to ask him from the Committee on the Rights of the Child view, how do you deal with child unfriendliness or the lack of child-friendly procedures?
Thank you, Alex. Yep, can you hear me?
Yes, go on.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex, Excellencies. Thank you, Luxembourg. Thank you, DCI. Let me speak in the words of the committee, basically, and I'm going to quote them. But first, let me say that we receive really very frequently reports that alarm us quite a bit from trusted sources from many regions of the world. Last week, I spent a lot of time with colleagues from telling me about the conditions of children flowing through borders between Niger, Chad, and Cameroon. We don't speak too much about that, and we haven't mentioned any other region of the world than Europe today. I chose 3 state parties, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and Greece that we reviewed recently. And just to tell you a little bit of the recommendations we gave. And you can recognize the child unfriendliness as I read through some of these recommendations. For the Netherlands, we're very concerned about reports that cases of asylum-seeking children over 15 years of age are assessed employing the same criteria used for adults. concerned about reports of deportation of asylum-seeking children without review of their cases, and the detention of such children or the separation of children from parents who are detained for immigration-related purposes. We asked the Netherlands to ensure child-friendly asylum procedures for all children under 18 years, including by ensuring early identification of their vulnerabilities and child-specific forms of persecution, and that they be interviewed in a child-friendly manner. I would say that's basic procedure. It should be child-friendly. That the Netherlands should ensure that all asylum claims, including those submitted by children over 15 years of age, are reviewed in a child-friendly manner with due consideration for their age when they fled their country of origin. And that they should be provided with appropriate information and legal advice about their rights and all the rest. For Switzerland, we asked the state party to ensure that the authorities in charge of asylum procedures comply with the right of the child to have his or her best interest as a primary consideration. Why do we have to remind such a basic principle? And this includes developing a procedure for assessing and determining the best interests of the child in all asylum processes, to strengthen the coordination between the asylum system and the child protection system, back to Nantina's point, which I endorse with a caveat, will I come back to. And we should also exempt children from the so-called accelerated asylum procedure. And this I'll come back to later in the second round, there should be established age determination procedures that respect the privacy and integrity of the child, and that include multidisciplinary assessment of the child's maturity and level of development, and respects the legal principle of the benefit of doubt. When I hear the number of cases that are 15 and 16 and older, states hide behind very cursory assessments or faulty procedures. And for Greece, I'm not going to read through everything, but very alarmed about reports of forced returns, or what we call pushbacks of migrant families and children, harassment of human rights defenders, the immigration detention of children for identification purposes, the generalized and inappropriate age-determined procedures. And last, let me just cite not really last, but let me just quote one more point. The lack of access to food and healthcare and the alarming rates of physical and mental health conditions, including self-harm and suicide attempts. And I know this could be transversal to many countries, but in this case, we were really quite taken aback by some of the conditions. One more sentence to conclude, and this is my personal conclusion. And it seems very clear to me that when it comes to migrants, the human and children's rights are much less rigorously applied. And that when we do criticize political authorities or administrative authorities, it tends to fall on deaf ears. So to come back to this idea of integrating all children on the move into established protection systems, I say yes to that. But then we really have to put a lot of work into improving the child protection services in just about every country I know, because I'm not sure children are really taken care of in the most appropriate way. And we could criticize just about every country. Let me end here for now. Alex, back to you.
Thank you very much, Philip, and we'll come back in the second round. So I wanted to go back to Rahmat now. Rahmat, you heard also a lot of information about the different point of view on how we can prevent, how we could be also very much on the prevention side, preventing this violence that you experience, unfortunately. So you can speak on, feel free to speak on whatever you want to share. But one question I had, which I find interesting, is I know that you have had in Greece, after a long fight and resistance to all what you have been living, you managed to have a refugee status in Greece and protection as asylum, with asylum as a refugee. And then what happened? Because now you are in Switzerland, so you came in Switzerland. I was even shocked to see you here, and you applied again for a refugee. Are you systematically applying to all states, or why did you do that? And also, if you can also speak about, so not only to speak about negative, but if you see any good practices, anything that made you feel some stability or sure of yourself, of your dreams, you can also point out also this.
Okay. Yeah. So you mean how I processed here?
Yeah. Why, first of all?
Yeah, okay. First, because I have a dream. So in Greece, I was in Greece, I received the asylum, but that is not, but that is not everything. So that's the asylum, so that this paper or the passport ID that I have also in my country. But the children or we need protection, but there's no in Greece. There wasn't. And we need the basic needs. We need education, school. And that thing I didn't have there, because there was some organization, and we went there and I learned the Greek language there. But that's nothing. If I learned the language, that's just a key for me to integrate there. But education, school, the other things, basic needs, that things failed. And that's why I came here, and there's many reasons I came here. So the first reason also is this one, and I came here to improve my education and to get my dream.
Yes, and also not only from your direct experience, but I think you are in contact, and you have been in contact with many other children in Greece and here. So from there also you can perhaps share some. I understood that you have been exposed to violence from trafficking groups, and so what you say, I have not been protected, and I was a child. That was one of the reasons. And also the access to education, that this I mentioned, it was his dream already in Afghanistan when he was there, and dreaming of going to a school, and right, that it was denied to him. And whenever during his migration route, that was something I know that you have been looking, and so congratulations, I think 2 days ago you got your degree of the Swiss school, that you not only learned German, but also you succeeded very well the year. But what else? What tell us about some good practices. So you arrived in Switzerland. You go through the same procedure, which I'm sure you didn't want to go through the same asylum seeker procedures, lawyers, and so on. What did you see anything, something that it was supporting you, apart from Nantina and the people who were supporting you? But let's say from the procedures point of view,
Okay.
asylum seeking procedures.
Yeah, so the first I came here, so I didn't know also about that. So how it's gonna going the process of my asylum. And there was Nandina and of course Alex. So you helped me a lot, and I'm very happy, and I'm gonna not forget it. So the first time when I informed that I get asylum here, I informed from Nandina from Greece, and he wrote me, "Yeah, you got asylum in Switzerland," and I was very happy about that. And that's so that help that you that I got from you, and I'm gonna share with other in the future. So I'm gonna help the other people, of course. So when I was in Greece, I did also a group of Telegram. So I had a lot of people there for like translating. Some people need help, and I still have it, and I do still that because of you, because I got how the other helped me and how can I help the other one.
Thank you very much, Rahmat. So Rahmat, he is part of a small group now, which we call them the Youth Ambassadors. And in fact, he's online with children in Moria and in other places who have been in the place where he was. So giving concrete advice, supporting them psychologically, what he was missing perhaps at the time when he was all alone and exposed to a lot of threats. Feel free to react also to other interventions. Nantina, in order to continue the discussion, can you give us now some concrete ideas? We are speaking about child-friendly justice procedures, restorative justice, how these principles that we apply in other contexts, including in Europe, but also in the South, in the global South, how we can apply them in this context with children on the move.
Yes, thank you, Alex, for this question. I would like to start by mentioning one thing that unfortunately is the reality that we have to start from. And this is that, as Rahmat explained, all children in migration, they already come with a trauma from their own countries because a child protection system failed to protect them there in the first place. Then this trauma is coupled by the experiences that they encounter along the journey. And then they enter Europe in different countries. And this harm, unfortunately, due to institutional deficiencies, only gets deeper and deeper and deeper. From my experience, what I'm listening actually when I'm talking with these children is that they really seek for an element of justice. Because what we're discussing here, it is about justice and only justice. And when I speak about justice, I mean about meaningful justice. Justice that has an impact on their daily life. So if we wanted to redesign a little bit the process and how the system is, I think we should really take into account that these people come with specific peculiar particularities. Due to the systemic deficiencies, the particularities turned into vulnerabilities. They were not born vulnerable, they became vulnerable, and they keep getting more and more vulnerable. A way to repair what Rahmat is actually saying here today is that a personal contact that he had with some stakeholders, with some civil society organizations, made a restoration in his soul and in his mind and in his heart. A restoration when it comes to the faith to humanity, when it comes to faith to justice. This is an example. This is a paradigm that could be duplicated when it comes also to the personal relationship between an individual and a state, an individual and an institution. And this is what is called restorative justice. If I give you the definition of restorative justice, is nothing else than an approach to justice that actually seeks to repair harm by providing a safe space for states and institutions to have a dialogue, to have a positive change, to have a positive outcome. Normally, this is applied in the context of private crimes, perpetrator and victim. Why not to envision something similar if we feel that the justice system, it is a living entity? And this can happen also by really involving children in the participation process, by really implementing the right of the child to be heard, which is one of the 4 cross-cutting principles found in the text of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So I think I will stop here and maybe later we can discuss more.
Thank you, Nantina. I go back to Mrs. Pavlaki, and I know that the Secretariat is a new structure, but at the same time, you have been launching quite a lot of new pilot projects. So can you share some of these ideas, and if there are already results, it will be excellent. Thank you.
Yes, of course I will. However, I see some questions in the chat, and I would like to clarify that today I am representing the Special Secretariat for the Protection of Unaccompanied Minors, which is a specific service, and it does not have to do with the Border Patrol or the Frontex. So please, I encourage you to send me all questions for the projects of the Special Secretariat. However, I'm not the Special Secretary himself, and they will need to address to the competent authorities for that. Can I also ask, address about the guardianship project that it was mentioned before, or we will have some additional time after that?
Yes, you can address also some words on the, because it was a kind of question also, yeah.
Yes, thank you. So I would like to present some of the good practices, and we started from the NERM, from the National Emergency Response Mechanism. Of course, this is part and a bit of the child protection system in place, and unfortunately the 5 minutes presentation does not allow me to go further. Concerning the guardianship scheme, which we also believe that is very important, and you mentioned, thank you for that, the legislative reform that it took a long time, as we wanted to have something concrete that could also work in the field, as we believe that the former law did not was very complex to work, is now in public consultation. So I encourage you to add your comments and to give us your feedback on how you believe that it would be more operational. So moving on to some pilot projects and some good practices that we have developed. And as you said, the Special Secretariat is a new service in place. And taken from the example of having a former unaccompanied minors sharing their experience, we have implemented for the first time in the Ministry of Migration in the Special Secretariat a project which is called the Mentorship Project, with the support of the European Union Agency for Asylum. The project is led by 3 former unaccompanied minors who have entered Greece through different phases. Some of them have entered during 2010, 2015, so they have a different experience to share. However, they have also faced obstacles, bottlenecks, and a lot of challenges. So those young adults are there today. They have finished Greek school. Some of them have attended the educational system, and they are there to support unaccompanied minors residing today in accommodation facilities and supported independent living schemes. They are there to provide advice, to act as role model, and to motivate, to encourage children's participation in school. And it's also very important, as you said, to discuss about projects or the opportunities with children at a language that they can understand. So who is best to discuss about these problems and the challenges and the projects than former unaccompanied minors? Also, I believe that it is very important to have former unaccompanied minors working in the Special Secretariat, as they can provide their hands-on experience and also provide feedback for policymakers. As I know that the schedule is tight, I would also like to discuss, apart from the support given to unaccompanied minors through alternative modalities as a mentorship project, also to a project that supports the people who support the children, professionals working in accommodation centers. So in collaboration with SOS Children's Greece and with the funding of SOS Children's Austria and the government of Tirolo, we have developed the Mental Health Hub. This is a project that aims in providing, first of all, capacity building to professionals working in the accommodation facilities. What we have seen is that a lot of times we create trainings that target only psychologists or social workers. However, what we want to do in this project is to provide support and capacity building to all professionals independent of their specialization. At the same time, we have seen that it is a very challenging sector to work in, and we have seen that either due to burnout or due to short-term contracts, there is a turnover to the professionals working in the accommodation facilities. So this program also is aiming at training of trainers. So we will provide one trainer for each organization, for each one of the operators, the actors operating accommodation facilities, who will be trained and then work as a multiplier for the professionals. At the same time, as I mentioned, the burnout, it is very important for the people working for this small society developed in the accommodation center to create bonds and to work in a smooth way. So we will also provide clinical supervision. In fact, they have already started since the project is implemented since May. So then the professionals have the time to discuss about their issues. The last thing that this project aims to develop is interventions to children. However, as first we would like to complete the capacity building circle and to continue with the clinical supervisions, we're now planning together with the scientific committee of the project and SOS Children's Greece, what could be done for the intervention to children and what protocols could we develop in collaboration with psychiatrists in order to give tools to the professionals to work with children.
Thank you very much, Claire. And we'll leave some space for questions at the end. So let's go now to Vasil. Vasil, we are now into good practices and solutions to end institutional violence. So from the IOM toolkit and experience, what would you propose?
Thank you for this question. And actually, right, I mean, in terms of approaches and practices and how to end the violence, institutional violence against children. I mean, I wish I would have an easy and straightforward and, 1 minute answer. But maybe, well, okay, with my 20 years of experience in the area of migration, maybe let me come up with a note of optimism, because I think now we are better than ever equipped with, well, apart from the international law, we're better than ever equipped with international frameworks that support us in policy development and implementation on the global level. If we look 10 years ago, there were no SDGs and no GCM, no GCR. Now we have this, and this is an excellent framework for us. Second thing is, I mean, well, it came not that recently, but now I see the change in the discussion, not only focusing on the top policy level recommendations, what is needed to be done, but I see the shift towards looking at particular details, how the policies may be implemented, what are the tools and mechanisms, so that we bring the policy from the global level to the level of the officers who implement this or should implement these policies on the ground, who are on daily basis, face to face with children on the move, with people on the move. So, and in fact, well, I would like to mention that, well, now the fora on these issues is quite an extensive. For instance, well, in my unit, we cooperate really great with within the Joint Task Force on Children Deprived Liberty. We cooperate with within the UN Migration Network, which is set there to support states in implementing those objectives that are set in the Global Compact. And there I would like to mention that, for instance, Objective 13, which is targeting on alternatives to detention, is an excellent framework where we have a good cooperation between civil society, UN agencies, international organizations, and with a lot of government feedback. Well, now when we just few weeks ago going through the first migration review forum that assessed the implementation of the GCM, it was really great to see a number of pledges, including in the area of alternatives to detention, for instance, that were put forward, and also by the task force. By the way, that was a great achievement, I believe. I would like to conclude by saying the following. It's basically, well, Alex, you mentioned that, well, IOM has offices around the globe, and it is true. We have offices not only in each country. In many countries, we have several offices. We have around 400 offices globally, and we cooperate quite actively with the civil society, with you, with other UN agencies, with other international organizations, NGOs. And basically, what I see now, what I observe now, that the tools which we develop for the implementation of the Global Compact within, the working group on alternatives to detention, access to services and justice, and many others, they are basically straight away going into the projects, into the activities, which we, in cooperation with the governments, able to pilot and see how this works. And of course, while there is no one size fit all, every country has specific institutional frameworks, legislative frameworks, and so on. We also try to see how the experience may be replicable in other areas of the world, and also bring what Najat was, for instance, mentioning, the South-South cooperation, North-North, North-South, and South-North. So this is an important thing. And well, I would like to conclude by saying that, well, it's also a great now time that we are able to produce very good studies and reports that allow us to compile and assess the information, learn from it, and apply in other parts of the world. I think I will stop here, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Vasily. And going to Professor Appert here another time, and ask you a bit as a professional psychologist, how the psychological approach can enrich these new child-friendly solutions and avoiding institutional violence.
Thank you. Definitely the idea of restorative justice, and Adina mentioned, and child-friendly justice is a start. I mean, justice in general focuses on punishment, but when we talk about restorative justice, we're talking about changing the narrative for these people, providing them an opportunity to actually have a voice, and to also start developing an idea and meaning as to why this is happening to me. Because most of those children on the move don't really know what is happening to them and why this is happening to them. So a framework of, a restorative justice or child-friendly justice would allow them to hear from the people who were supposed to protect them, why they were not protected, and what we're going to do for them from now on. So, to build again on this level of, on this element of trust in the person, trust in the institution, trust in humanity in general. So, definitely that is the beginning for me, in order to start restoring or building on or giving meaning, let's say, to the trauma that they continuously go through. Capacity building that Ms. Pavlaki mentioned before is also crucial on my end, because these are the adults that are supposed to help these children start their journey and develop their new identities, or restore their identities, let's say, into this new world or wherever they are at this point. And capacity building needs to be informed a lot by psychological principles, needs to be informed by developmental principles. And this goes back to restorative justice as well, and child-friendly justice, that we need to take into account developmental norms, not only cultural norms or country norms, but also developmental norms in what is considered, what is the child considered capable of doing or understanding? I mean, I was reading recently some articles on, the age of criminal responsibility for migrant children around different European countries. And we really don't take into account the fact that obviously a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old and an adult do not have the same cognitive capacity or capability or the same psychological skills or psychological defenses. And when we put these children in, the institution of justice or the institutions or the different institutions that they have to face and interact with, we need to take into account and always inform the people who are on the other end that you cannot judge a child or, take care of a child without actually knowing what's considered appropriate for this child and what's going to help them more. So this best interest of the child that we keep talking about, it's usually decided by adults and not necessarily always trained adults on what is the best interest for the child. And I don't know how much more time I have.
1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute, good. The other point I want to make, because I hear that quite often, is that there is a lot of literature out there and a lot of research out there and a lot of alternatives to detention, to training people. I mean, as academics, we look into that, and we go after that, collecting data and actually, coming up with solutions. What I see as the main problem is a great fragmentation between institutions, between states, between disciplines in sharing this information so that we can actually come to a point where we can help people for real. So I think that Jed mentioned that before, that we need to start sharing. Ms. Pavlaki mentioned about developing new protocols. There are so many protocols out there that have already been assessed for their effectiveness on how to train people who are not professionals actually in dealing with migrant children or children on the move or children who have been abused. The resources are there. We just need to start talking to each other and collaborating in producing the effects. And the last thing I wanted to mention in terms of policy development is that we're really good at developing policies at a higher level. What again I see as quite often missing is applying these policies in real world circumstances and assessing how they actually work, because we may have an idea of how they work, but we really need to and this comes back to participation, which is part of restorative justice, get the children and get the people who are actually going to be the recipients of all those policies to participate and let us know, do they work, how they work in the long run. So stop for now.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your very useful comments, in particular regarding child-friendly justice, the minimum age of criminal responsibility, and that brings us back to the CRC, because the CRC is writing a lot. It has the concrete practices, but it has also, for instance, General Comment 24 on children on the justice system, where they recommend to states to have as a minimum 14 years old as an age for criminal responsibility. But going back to Philip, I wanted to ask him, we know all the member states are not members of the third protocol on communications, but we know that quite a lot are already. And I wanted to ask you, how do you deal with individual complaints? Do you have any cases on children on the move? And if you can give us some concrete examples, thank you.
Yes, Alex, we have many, many cases of children on the move, and only 47 states have ratified the third protocol. So imagine what would happen if some of the states we talked about today ratified. We would need to triple membership on the CRC to just be able to read through all the cases. So just so everybody understands, the committee also acts as a quasi-judicial body, and we adjudicate individual complaints from children who allege violations of their rights. And I wanted to tell you about one case, because there's so many and we have so little time. It's a young migrant child. It's a migrant child from Cameroon who reached the country in Europe. I won't say which one. You can find it, it's published. So she said she was 16 and a half. She was initially treated as a child. She also said she was sexually abused, very seriously. She didn't have proper documentation, so there was no benefit of the doubt. They moved her to an adult facility. And I'm going to skip to the age determination, which was not really contested by the state. She said she had 2 bone age tests, and a wrist x-ray, which determined she was 17 years old, And then she got a second one, which was an X-ray of the jaw, which was a very poor quality image, I'm quoting, and her age could not be assessed. But this forensic expert physician came in and said, well, she looks like she's at least 18 years of age. When there's no way of scientifically claiming this, I mean, there's a big margin of error of up to 2 years. So soak in what I'm going to say. She was not represented by counsel during the age determination procedure, very child-friendly. She was examined by a forensic physician without the assistance of an interpreter, so they couldn't talk to each other. She was not provided any information of the results. She was not given an opportunity to object. She was not asked to give any additional information. You know, I'm a clinical psychologist. When you receive a patient, you also gather information other than just the object of the consultation. And listen up here. She was put through a physical examination, including an examination of her genitalia, for which she was required to undress completely. Very invasive, very unfriendly for anyone, child or adult. We determined, the committee, that she was a particularly vulnerable migrant child, girl, and that special precautions should have been taken. And there was some documentation of sexual abuse, and the very least was not to carry out a genital examination. And just imagine the amount of fear and the risk of re-traumatization that goes along with this. So basically, we spelled out some of the how some of these procedures should be carried out. Comprehensive assessment of a child's physical and psychological development, that these age assessments should be conducted by specialized pediatricians or other professionals who can combine different aspects of development. And obviously, we also said that these physical examinations, genital examinations, had to cease immediately. And so we recognized her complaint. We recognized the violation. We asked the state to change its procedures, and to the best of my knowledge, they have. But as you know, in many, many countries, age determination is something that does not benefit children who look perhaps a little bit older than their chronological age, and who may not have proper documentation. And we keep insisting through our decisions that the benefit of the doubt has to be in the child's favor. And some of the states that are party to the third protocol comply with this injunction, and many who do not, and even those who do, some do not comply. So again, it's a way for, if I could just urge everyone to push their own states to ratify the third protocol. It's also a way to keep national jurisdictions on their toes, and not to act as a alternative last resort kind of approach to seeking justice, but just to keep in mind that children's rights are a very specific set of rights that national jurisdictions don't always take into account sufficiently. And let me add another thing. When countries ratify the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the third protocol, most of them are pretty happy with the results. It makes them reform their systems in positive ways. And I would just really, again, encourage everyone to move towards having a greater ratification. I think we're at 47 states last time I looked. So there's a way to go, at least another 150 that could, which can ratify. Thank you, Alex, back to you.
Thank you, Philip. That's a very concrete example and way how the committee is with the little resources it has, it manages to work out. And beyond the individual cases, this is a very good guidance on what things to avoid and how to avoid them and prevent them. Now we have been a little bit late, but I still want to give the floor to any questions from the room and from the chat. Is there anybody who wants to address questions to or comments to the panel? Please present yourself.
Hello. Okay, perfect. Hi to everyone. My name is Iris Papa. I'm from DCI Greece, coordinator of the Children's Rights Help Desk. And thank you for all the speeches and the statements. It was a very interesting discussion. What I would like to mention, and I think it is important to put the spotlight on, is the importance of a case management approach that we should follow, the allocation of responsibilities and the constant follow-up. As the recommendations of the UNCRC committee pointed out, many times there is no clarity of the roles, there is no clarity of responsibilities, and these can actually have a tremendous impact on children's life, even if there is a mechanism in place. And I would like to share a very indicative example coming from our work a few months ago. We had actually an unaccompanied minor reached our help desk asking for accommodation because he was living on the streets or in shared apartment with adults. He was exposed to countless dangers. So his only request was accommodation to be found. Indeed, there was an immediate response and the shelter was found a few days later. However, as part of the process, because children have to visit the police station for their identification, it was found out that the child was pre-registered a few months ago as an adult. So what happened in the meantime is that when we actually asked him, because we wanted to check on him, how is the shelter, is everything okay, have you been transferred there? His answer was no, because they saw that I'm an adult and I don't know what happened, but I'm still on the streets. So it took us a lot of communication, a lot of coordination to see who is responsible in this particular case to initiate an age assessment. So we initiated eventually an age assessment, and after 2-3 weeks, it was concluded that this child was indeed a child and only 15 years old. But in the meantime, this child had to live on the streets for 2-3 weeks more. Also, I think it's very important to speak also about the children that are transitioning into the adulthood and that are becoming 18 years old. We have many children that are now 17 and are approaching to the age of 18, that they have to leave the shelters and to be transferred to other accommodation facilities like in camps. And their request is, I really want to stay still in Athens, for instance, because I have my friends here, I haven't completed yet school, and it will be difficult for me to go to a totally strange place and to start from the beginning. And we had, of course, in the past cases where children, because they were transferred to another shelter, they stopped their education and they had to wait for months until to be registered again into the school community. So I think we all know and we understand that institutional violence can take many different forms. Some are more clear, direct, some are more hidden. And I really believe that what it is important is to always have our eyes open, to be very well trained in order to identify the forms. Because, you know, in our daily work, we can also be part of institutional violence accidentally. And I think it's important to be aware of the forms and in order to find the best way to mitigate and to fight against. And of course, the cooperation. I mean, I think, and I hope, and I want to believe that all of us, regardless of our position, if we are working in an NGO, if we were working at the authorities, we have the same goal. And only through cooperation and if we have our minds open, we can find the best ways to support the children in need. Thank you.
Thank you very so much. We are a little bit late, but we can take a last question if there is any urgent one. Otherwise, we will go to the conclusions. Ambassador Bashler, please, a few words.
Yes, thank you. I certainly will not have the ambition to draw conclusions. As representatives of state, we tend to talk a lot, and I think we should more often take the opportunity, like today, also to listen. That's what I tried to do, and I got my money worth for it, if I may use that expression. Listening to everybody around the table, from Ahmad through the colleagues from DCI, from IOM, and from the committee, of course, or from academia and practitioners, three adjectives popped to my mind, and the first one was overwhelming, the second one was complex, and the third one was integrated. That may not be now very special as a reaction, but just let me go into each and every one of these adjectives. Overwhelming, it's certainly the feeling that you have as an individual, but then also as a state when you are confronted with the conditions that make you get on the move and that make you wonder what, as a state, what means you need to put in place in order to live up to your responsibility and your commitments also. In terms of overwhelming at the level of the individual, and especially, of course, in the case of children on the move, I mean, Ahmad very pointedly and described what the challenges are, and I can only applaud him for the level of resilience that he as an individual was able to show for, of course, being helped by friendly people that are represented around the table. At the level of what can be seen as overwhelming at the level of a state can become overcome as only if the right political will is there to do so. So resilience on the individual level, political will at the collective level to overcome the overwhelming sentiment. Complex then, yeah, obviously the individual needs are complex. Again, we're speaking about the need for safety, to cover basic needs, social protection, psychological accompaniment. Then also the physical needs express themselves in terms of need for perspectives, of dreams, the term that Rahman used on several occasions, and also the need for trust. All of that, all of these different needs, to address all of these different needs is quite a complex challenge. At the level of the state, again, the complexity comes from the very different means that you have to align, you have to get your ducks on a row in order to provide effective answers in terms of infrastructure, in terms of human capacities, in terms of financial needs, also in terms of taking into account security and international relations. So that makes the situation even more complex. Then in terms of response, and that's where I would like to speak about the adjective of integrated. The response has to be integrated. It cannot be otherwise. Huh? And therefore we have to acknowledge, first of all, the special needs of children on the move. That's a given, and it goes without saying, but I say it anyway. The need for integrated approach through guardians, through educators, through medical staff, through academia also, in order to look into all the details that have to be addressed, and of course also an adequate administrative accompaniment of those that we want to help. So all in all, it's a multi-stakeholder approach that we need between the government, of course, on the one side, and the civil society on the other side. And that has come out very, very strongly, I suppose, this afternoon, is that we have to allow for the participation of those who are concerned first and foremost, in order to help to find adequate answers with partners, with friends, but have the participation of the children themselves, because they have had the experience, and they will know best what is needed. So all in all, for me this afternoon, this has been a lesson in modesty, but this does of course not liberate us from our responsibility to find the adequate answers in order to protect the most vulnerable, and thereby also to protect human rights in general. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We are late and we have to conclude. And I think what I'm happy for this event is that it was very oriented towards solutions and towards things very concrete, from Najat to the beginning to all the speakers on their area of expertise. They gave ideas on how we can transform these institutional visions to something much more friendly for the children. And I just wanted to share also an experience. It doesn't matter in which country, but it's a real case of a lady from DRC who arrived with her 3-year-old baby. And during the procedure, she was separated for a while. They told her we take it to play and so on. And then she lost trace of her child. During several months, this child was given to a host organization, but without saying that there is a mother waiting for them. So she was getting crazy, thinking that she will never see her child. And so there was a kind of administrative bug, but the child was separated with his mother, which is the worst that can happen to such a case. And it's only due to some NGOs who made an investigation, managed to trace down and reunite the family several months after the event. So let's try to avoid these things, and this can be avoidable with child-friendly procedures and restorative justice. And let's work together. I think it's something I take out of this event. Thank you so much for being with us. Also those online. Thank you.